Hey, this is Kim Boltzma again, and welcome back to our Introduction to DSLR Photography Premium course. Last time we discussed aperture priority, where we were able to be in control of light and how much of our picture area was in focus. Today we're going to discuss the exposure triangle, which is how ISO, shutter speed, and aperture all influence one another, and how it influences your decisions in manual mode. How the exposure triangle works is with the understanding that when you change one thing, the others are affected. For example, every time you double your ISO, you can halve your shutter speed. If you go from 200 to 400 ISO, you can go from a 1/100th of a second to a 200th of a second. The same goes with aperture. Let's revisit the aperture values. Here we see just a few of the apertures available. For example, an f2.8 is half the light of an f2. An f16 is half the light as an f11. So when we cut the light in half from an aperture standpoint, we have to somehow compensate for that in either ISO or shutter speed, or sometimes both. If our exposure is correct at 100th of a second at f2, going to f2.8, we will need to twice the amount of light, or a 50th of a second. Or if we left the shutter speed at 100th of a second and adjusted our aperture from 2 to 2.8, we would go from an ISO of 200 to an ISO of 400. Now is a good time to start switching your camera over to manual mode. Manual mode is a tough mode to master. I mean, you are in charge of everything. There are a few tricks you should know in order to help you achieve better results in the manual mode. First, consider what focal length you're using. For example, I'm going to use my favorite lens, the 15 to 85 millimeter Canon. If I zoom to 60 millimeters, then I instantly know that I can, for the most part, shoot safely at a minimum of a 60th of a second. So the trick is knowing that your safest handheld shutter speed is 1 over the focal length you're using. You cannot go slower than this, only faster. I can't handhold my camera if I'm shooting at 60 millimeters and have my shutter speed at a 30th of a second. I'll have a blurry picture. So if I'm using my 70 to 200 millimeter lens and I'm shooting at 200 millimeters, then my safest handheld shutter speed is, right, a 200th of a second. Second, remember your ISO ranges. Brightly lit situations can be shot using 100 to 400 ISO. Indoors should be set at 400 to 800 ISO range. Dark situations, 800 and above. Third, it's okay to chimp when you're starting out. Chimp means check image preview. Here's what it looked like. Take a picture, look at it on the back of the camera and say, ooh, look at that. For real though. You need to look at your playback mode, at the information recorded, and at the histogram to assess what's going on so you can make changes. Fourth, regardless of the metering mode you choose, you can look at the exposure slider in the bottom of your viewfinder and see what it's doing. If it's showing you that it's underexposing, then you need to do one or more of the following. Speed up your shutter, increase your ISO, or decrease your aperture. If the exposure slider shows that your image will be overexposed, then you can decrease your shutter speed, you can decrease your ISO, or you could increase your aperture. Fifth, practice. Practice, and then practice some more. Well, I think it's time to throw you to the wolves in an assignment. Okay. I want you to start by taking pictures inside your home during the day and put your camera in manual mode. Find an object of focus and zoom to where you want to be to capture the shot. Pay attention to your focal length and set up your shutter speed as we discussed earlier, 1 over the focal length. Then, consider your lighting. We're inside during the day. You're going to want to set your ISO somewhere in the 400 to 800 neighborhood. Then start with your lowest or your widest aperture. Play around and see what you come up with. And remember, for now it's okay to chimp. After you've done this, go to shutter priority mode and take the same picture. Then take the same pictures using aperture priority. Finally, go to program mode and shoot away. The reason I'm having you do this is so that you can see what the camera thinks should be done in each of these assisted manual modes. Then you can compare them to your manual pictures and see what you can do when you go back to the manual mode to get the correct exposure. After you achieve success with this, go outside during the daytime. And then for you really advanced people, you can take pictures at night. Try manual, shutter priority, aperture priority, and program to see what your camera thinks in these situations. Next time, we're going to talk about all things lenses, prime, wide angle, telephoto, and so on. Until then, I'm Kim Boltzma, and I want to congratulate you on advancing to the manual mode.